welcome to the next greatest UK OSINT community webinar. I am absolutely thrilled and delighted today to welcome UK OSINT itself. Neil Smith, founder of Locate International and long-time OSINT investigator, analyst, trainer, extraordinaire, and all-round generally lovely man. Neil, welcome to the UK OSINT community webinar series.
Thank you for that, and thank you for a lovely introduction, Aaron.
Okay, checks in the post.
Thank you very much.
So we're here today. We're going to talk around missing persons investigations, and you're going to give us some tips and insights into basically how to do investigations, some would say in your good old-fashioned way, for when tools and techniques that we might rely on day to day might fail us, or we need to do some good old-fashioned investigating. Is that right?
Yes, it's the sort of research that I do, the OSINT that I have been sort of doing and training for the last, nearly 20 years or over 20 years, is more about a manual investigation process as opposed to just letting tools do all of the actions for you and providing you with the answers. So it's very much not forgetting that you're an investigator. So looking for the clues that you need in an investigation to drive an investigation forward. And those things are best carried out by humans looking for information on humans. And sometimes if you just rely on, I'm going to search an email address and just rely on the tools that are there, or search a name and just rely on the tools that are there, even if you get some answers, you don't know why you've got the answers. So, sort of manually doing the research, manually doing those searches, finding the information, finding the links, and progressing the investigation has proved successful over 20 years, and I'm sure it will carry on proving successful, even though AI is getting better and better, and the tools that are out there are getting better and better.
Absolutely. I think for me, the tools, like, I rely on them a lot, but it's a tool. Like, it's one of the things in the arsenal, so they can help you achieve quick results and quick leads to follow up on. But I think if you're in the business of like using, I should pick on any company that provides like some level of automation, you put an email address in, you get a bunch of account associations back, and if that's where your investigation stops, then there's something wrong in that process. So I think like you're completely right in how we actually have to do the analysis, and I guess the INT part of OSINT is intelligence. Otherwise, it's just information, and until we understand the context and we apply that knowledge, then we're going to be not doing a very good job.
Yes, and there are some wonderful tools out there, but if you just put all the results into a report without analysing it and without seeing what is relevant and seeing where it takes you, then it's not really very helpful. You need, sometimes, they're just signposts. So, the wonderful tool that is OSINT Industries, and there are other ones out there where you're searching an email address or you're searching a mobile phone number, and it will return links to loads of different sites. And I think I've used this example in the past. And it will highlight, a Facebook account, perhaps, that telephone number is known on Instagram or something. But one of the sites, or the two sites that I really like that it points to, are, there's a chess site where people join up and play chess games, but it says when that site was created, it says when they were last active, it says who they're playing against, it has a profile image. All of those things are then new things that you can research. One of the other sites it points to, I'm going to say it's called something like Vimeo or something like that. It's a wine lovers site. And the number of times that I've used that, you find your subject has an account on Vimeo. You go onto it and you see who their followers are and who they're following on this wine site. Search those people to find them on Facebook, to find them on Instagram. Then you find your subject. Because normally your subject's trying to hide, whether we're doing a missing person investigation, whether we're trying to find wanted people, trying to find fraudsters. They're not making it easy to be found, but their friends online, they're just normal people. They're not hiding. So a site like Vimeo, the wine lovers site, when you're finding the people that your subject's linking to, they are new points for you to research. And the number of times people will just do the screen grab and say, oh, they've got this account, but we couldn't find anything useful. And you sort of go, well, yes, but who are they following? What posts have they made? Where are they? When was that account active? And it's those little things that all of this automation is great, but you need an investigator, as you say, it's the INT of intelligence to say, okay, what does that account tell me? And with the missing people inquiries that we do, knowing when an account was last active, or even knowing when it was created, may be the difference between, this is the information that is really relevant to the police, or this is so old it's of no relevance whatsoever. Um, and it's just using those tools to find these accounts and looking for the additional bits of information that sometimes investigators, they forget, or they sometimes, when you watch the TV programs and people just click a few buttons, and when you tell people I'm cyber investigations or it's all on the internet, people expect all the answers to be cyber. They expect all the answers to jump out at you and to be told to you. Actually, it's just more information, and you have to go through it as an investigator. So years ago, when we were in the police and you would do door-to-door inquiries, and you'd be knocking on doors, speaking to loads of people before you find somebody who's got something relevant to tell you. Now we're looking at page after page of information until you find something relevant, until you find something that really progresses that investigation. And some of the online tools are great, but where does that investigation go from having been told this person's got an account, having been told they've got an account name? I was doing some inquiries, not for missing people, but for some other inquiries the other night, and using two or three different tools, um, basically got all bar 2 digits of somebody's mobile telephone number. Well, okay, it's everything except 2 digits. Now I've just got to play around with those 2 digits to try and find where they are on WhatsApp, where they are on Telegram, and actually from a 10 or 12 digit telephone number, if you're given all bar two, it's so useful. But you've got to use two or three different sites, not just rely on one. But always, as an investigator, the information that you're given, where does that push the investigation? You've got to push it as far as you can, and maybe this is just giving us new things to investigate.
No, for sure. I think like something there we call that like the phone number thing. You can then go to, some of the data breach search engines and stuff will allow you to do those wildcards. So then suddenly you've gone from, oh, I started with 2 digits of this phone number to 9 of 11 to, well, now I can see every data breach that matches at least the majority of that, and we can hone in on that further. And then again, I suppose we use those tools, enrich which one of these looks most likely, and then we go down that rabbit hole and continue, and then hopefully we find out what their favorite wine is.
Yes, but it is that thing about, if we talk about missing people, excuse me, terrible cough and cold at the moment, so I apologise. In relation to missing people, if I go missing, or if I went missing, my wife, we've been together for 40 years. My wife would have my mobile telephone number. She'd have an email address. She may have a Facebook account, but she has no interest in anything online, so she'd have no other details for me. But actually, just looking on my desk here, I've got another 5 or 6 mobile phones. I've got loads of email addresses. And actually, finding these partial details opens up the investigation and suddenly says, well, okay, there's a whole life that person had that the person that's reported them missing is totally unaware of. And you quite often with younger children, young adults, especially in county lines cases, if we get any social media details at all from the police, they'll say, "Oh, here's the individual's Instagram account," and it'll be the one Instagram account the parents know about. But I've yet to research a county lines kid who's got less than 10 Instagram accounts, because they just create them as they're growing. And they've got the family one, they've got the younger child one, they've got the skater park one, then they've got the, you know, hanging about with kids that are smoking, then it's the hanging about kids that are doing drugs, hanging about kids that are drinking. And every account is a different time period in that child's life. But as far as the police and the parents are concerned, there's the one that they know about and none of the others. And it's using the links that you can find, using the information that's available, just to progress that investigation. And we've had it a couple of times. Say, county lines kids are a good example, where you can go from one account to another, because there's always a constant thread. There's a friend from school who's also gone down the same road, so he was or she was perhaps on the one the family know about. They're on the next one, they're on the next one, and perhaps seeing the way that the names change, the logos change, you can follow one or two friends, or view the accounts of one or two of the subject's friends, to view those extra accounts. And when you check out the about account page on or tab on Instagram, knowing when that account was created, seeing when that account was created, and you can literally put them into a line and work out when they were created, what stage of being groomed by a drugs gang these children were in. And looking for the tagged posts, even on private accounts, searching the screen names, seeing what comes up, not just using Google, but using Bing, using Yandex. Different search engines return different results. And sometimes, even if an account is private, it's you've been tagged in that public post. And just progressing that inquiry, quite a few times we've found, let's say, county lines kids who, whilst being reported missing to the police, and they have been groomed by drugs gangs, and some of them, they're not contracts on their heads, but they're going to come to harm because they owe the drugs gangs £10,000 or something. But they're active on Instagram, and their friends are still posting them on Instagram, and it just takes that one friend who's got a public post. And we've identified a couple of kids, which area they're in, who they're hanging around with, and passing that to the police and say, well, they might be missing for 2 weeks, but I can tell you last night they were in this property with this person. In fact, we had one recently, was one on TikTok, and it was literally searching the screen name that we knew the young person had gone missing under. Searching that screen name, found that he was tagged into a TikTok video of them being stopped by the police, and they recorded the stop check, and the policeman checking the vehicle, but he obviously didn't check all the people in the car. And it was just a case of sending that back to the police and saying, well, look, we've got the registration number of the vehicle, you can see the police officers doing a check on it. And this is where I say, if you can hear explosions, this is being recorded on bonfire night, and I think it's quite active outside my window. Excuse me. So we fed that back to the police to sort of say, if you check when this vehicle was checked on the police national computer, the officer's details will be on it, and that'll tell you who the driver of the car was and where they were. And your missing person, who's been groomed by a drugs gang, who's hanging around with a drugs gang, is being driven around the streets of London at excessive speed in a very expensive Mercedes. Um, and this is who he's hanging around with. And you just sort of go, it's just little clues like that. So it's using these tools to find the accounts, and then who are they linked to? Who are they with? Are those people posting about them? And quite often they do. You know, it's if 20 years ago, somebody had said a criminal's going to be posting photographs about themselves. Well, first of all, we wouldn't have known what posting was, but a criminal's going to be taking videos or photographs of themselves committing a crime or doing something illegal. And we'd go, no, why would anybody sane do that? But we live in a world now where people are online and people are active and people, sort of in the 70s and 80s, um, it was people were always lighting up cigarettes because you couldn't go half an hour without a cigarette. Um, Now people can't go half an hour without taking a photograph or a video and uploading it. And a lot of those people are of interest to somebody. Are they missing? Are they criminals? Are they under suspicion of something? And it's just trying to find the one who's got the public account, who's posted an image of your missing person or your suspect, who's tagged them into something. And quite often the clues are there, but you've got to go looking for them. It's no good. You're not going to get spoon fed everything. It's no good saying, like, put the email address in or the phone number in. I haven't got an account. Well, okay, then the one account you have got, who are their friends? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Instagram? Let's spread the investigation out. And, so often, um, you're finding these clues if you push the envelope of the investigation.
Not for sure. You're making me yearn for the days when we, go out, do some crime, and then upload it to our MySpace page.
And it is just absolutely crazy. And it's a different generation. And it's hard to believe that people do it, but they do. And it isn't just the younger people. It is, you know, people get addicted to social media and people do these things. And, if we'd said 20 years ago that, police officers would be taking photographs of crime scenes and then sending them to their friends or joking about them online to people, and we go, no, they wouldn't do that. But it's every other week that it's in the press that the people that are supposed to be investigating and helping us are doing these things. So it's not just young kids who are misguided, it's everyone. And I always used to say about uh, when I used to give sort of presentations to people about why you use OSINT, excuse me, when my kids were young and you would research the teachers or research the school, because it isn't just the fact that it's the paedophile school teacher, which happens. It's also the fact that the person who's in charge of your children during the day or taking them on a school trip, how much were they out partying the night before? And it is, there are so many people that live their lives online. So it's whatever you want to investigate, there's an online reason for doing it. And, over the last sort of 20 years, I've investigated, literally tens of thousands of cases for all different scenarios. And every time it's somebody's posted something incredibly stupid that has helped the client and has hindered the claimant or the suspect or the whatever, but the information is generally out there. Yes, if you're researching a 60-year-old or 80-year-old couple, they're not likely to be online, but their grandchildren might be. Their sort of their kids might be, and they might post about them. But not everyone is online, but everyone knows someone who's online, so it's always worth checking.
100%. I think that's really interesting. Like, almost like hypothesis as well for like almost all investigations, because I know like I think it like to a point in an investigation, and invariably it's always one of those cases where there's a reason somebody is hard to find, and it's always like I'm always trying to find that next bit of information that I know is going to be the one that opens it up. So quite often it'll be like, if I can find a bit more information about this email address, usually it's the bloody characters in the email address from the partial bit that I have, then I can go and I know that's probably more likely to yield results rather than, like a corporate email address where I'm not gonna find that they are, hugely active online from a work email. If I'm super lucky and they're old enough, they're in the Ashley Madison breach or something like that. Invariably
Yeah.
that information's never really quite there. It's always that personal email address, that personal phone number is always the one that you need to sort of get your hands on to really understand where the target is active. And then I guess subsequently that's where you can also then verify all those other suspicions where you think, right, this looks like a best friend, this looks like a family member, these are converging. I think that's the individual, and then providing that extra level of verification.
Yes, and it is, sometimes as you say, it's that thinking about that hypothesis, thinking about where the investigation could go, but not being so rigid that you wouldn't change course. So, quite often when you hear of, say, police investigations going wrong, it's where they've stuck rigidly to an idea of who's committed a crime or why a crime's been committed. But really, you've got to be quite open minded until you're sure. So, whilst, it's a working hypothesis, you've got to be aware that there are, other things could have happened. And it's one of the good things about Locate, and I should say with Locate International, which I sort of helped create with Dave Grimstead. The idea very much was that with the cold cases, the missing people who aren't actively being looked for by the UK police, and there's something like 13,000 sort of missing people. They've been missing for more than 12 months, that they're still on the police books, but the police aren't actively going out there. And there's 1,000 unidentified bodies. What we used to say to, when interviewing potential volunteers and things like that, is that all the easy cases to be solved have been solved. And all of these cases generally, been investigated by people who look like me, middle-aged white guys. And nothing against middle-aged white guys, because I'm a middle-aged white guy. But sometimes you actually need people with different ideas, different backgrounds, different history, different genders, different races, different religions, to actually come and look at the investigation and say, well, everyone's thought this might have happened. Well, actually, could this have happened? And sometimes having to justify why an investigation's gone down a particular route instead of down a different route gets you to question, well, actually, is there a possibility? Should we have looked this way? Should we have looked that way? And it's great having the volunteers there of, from 18 up to sort of 80 plus. If I'm thinking about a missing kid, yes, when I was in the police, I investigated missing kid cases, but then I was nearer 20 myself. If I'm thinking about a missing kid case now, I'm 57. Kids have changed. Yes, I've got, I've had young children that now grown up, but I'm not 100% aware of the pressures of being a child now, how a child lives, the fact, what are they looking at online? So having 18 and 20-year-old students as part of Locate really helps. Having people who've got no experience of policing, but have got a lifetime of experience in admin, in religion, in a charity sector, they're able to instantly question, oh, well, should we look at this? Should we look at that? And some of the cases, when we've looked at them, instantly There are some people on the OSINT team for Locate who, as soon as we've looked at somebody's Instagram account or their TikTok account, there's one or two of the team members that will go, oh, they're following a self-harm site. They're following a particular site that instantly tells them, oh, we should be looking here. We should be looking in this direction. Now, I could probably work that out by the time I'd gone through everyone's friends, but they know it instantly because they're so much younger, or that's the world they inhabit. So sometimes having, different people with different backgrounds really helps. And I say it's not, sort of necessarily a criticism of the police, because the police can only investigate and research what they've been told by the family to investigate and research. So a lot of the times when we're looking at cases of transgender missing people, and there's such a really sad high self-harm and suicide rate amongst the trans community, and sometimes you'll see the missing person report is for, say, a James so and so, somebody's son's gone missing, and then when you start looking at their social media, it's quite clear they don't live as James, they live as Jane, and they're not now a son, they should be a daughter. And if the police haven't been told that, the police aren't aware of it, and they would just be looking online for James, and they wouldn't even, because the parents perhaps are too embarrassed or too blinkered to embrace someone's lifestyle, their investigation's going off in a different direction. Whereas when we start looking at these cases, and they're always so sad, the trans ones, because you can sometimes see that when the families put out the missing person details, they have gone for the old name, the old gender, and that's probably reinforced why the person's gone missing. But it would be no good going online searching for James. You've got to search for the new identity. And quite quickly, when we're searching for these, you can see um, which groups they're following, which sites that they're linking to, and even if we're not finding them, perhaps it is giving the police somewhere else they should be looking, or something else they should be aware of. Because I say, if the family don't tell them, then the police aren't to know. They're only looking in the real world, whereas actually in the online world, it tells you what somebody's lifestyle really is like. So yes, it's sort of so quickly having people with different experiences really helps push an investigation forward.
Not for sure. I think that's a really important point because those, again, I guess it's not a dig at anyone, but those cognitive biases that we all have, that we are all blissfully unaware of, I think is you completely hit the nail on the head when you bring in a team with diverse background, diverse thought. And as you were talking, my first thought was, yeah, actually, I'm, I'm slightly less middle aged, might I add, but like if I was to investigate somebody from, I don't know, say like an Indian or a Pakistani family, and I don't really have the exposure or the knowledge of what their cultural norms are, like religious things, like how they spend family time, what they do at weekends, and
Yeah.
that sort of knowledge. So I would be very much in the dark, and I would probably just go down the same rabbit hole I would do for any generic white person I would investigate. And I think having somebody who oh well, this post is really interesting because that date corresponds to like this event, which is really important, and I'd be clueless on that. So that is really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it really brought it home to me a few years ago. I was teaching, I was going to say, at one of the universities in London. I was doing an OSINT course for that university, and I was explaining about screen names or account names, and the fact that people regularly change their account names. So we've got to grab the account number for a Facebook account, for an Insta, for a Twitter. And one of the examples I gave for why people change their names, apologies that it's a sexist world that we live in, is about when women get married and adopt the man's surname. And there were people, there were some Europeans in there, but also people from sort of the Asian continent. The concept of a woman changing their surname to the man's surname and what a maiden name was completely alien to them. And they were saying, well, in our country, it's whoever's in the highest class, they adopt that name. So the man could adopt, the woman's surname. And you sort of thinking, well, I just wouldn't have known that. I would be looking for, particular family name, because of the structures that I know of being, somebody from the UK. But when you have people with international experience, when you have people from diverse backgrounds and different countries, all of a sudden the investigation opens up and it gives you something else to consider that that you just would have discounted because it's just not something that we come across in our sort of white UK European exposure.
Yeah.
You know, from all my experiences, this happens, but actually, with the person I'm investigating, isn't from my area. So should I start looking at this? I mean, not to do with missing people, but when I used to do a lot of insurance investigations, and the insurance company would always say, "Yeah, can you do some Facebook research on this person?" And you go, "Yeah, I could, but they're an East European or a Russian, so yes, I'm going to find some stuff on Facebook." But I've also got to look on VK. I've got to look on OK because that's those accounts are still active for them to keep in touch with their friends back in their homeland. And actually, if we're trying to prove a connection between in a staged accident, actually the connection might be more likely to be on VK or OK rather than on Facebook. And it's just knowing where your investigation or who's part of your investigation as to what sites you look at. And it was always whenever we did insurance work, and it was always, can you look at Facebook? And you go, I know what you mean. I'm just, but I'm going to look at so much more than Facebook. But they were the client, and they were convinced that that was all we ever looked at, despite all the evidence coming from a load of other sites.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
I think I was want to come back as well. You made the point there around like people on Facebook and Instagram following like self-harm pages.
yes.
Um, there's a guy I think he's based in the UK. I want to say his name is Paul Raffi or Raffle. Um, he's done some work, a lot of work into it's like Nigerian scam gangs, and I'm
Oh, yes.
sure other groups from other countries as well. But I saw something from him fairly recently where he was talking about how the numbers of children that are getting targeted on meta-owned platforms, and and it results in self-harm, it results in suicides, because effectively these children are being targeted, getting into like effectively a sextortion scam, and they're threatening to oh, you sent me some photos, I'm going to share them to all your family, all your friends, etc. And it's like it's a staggering number. It was like tens of thousands of
And
children
it,
being targeted.
and it is just absolutely shocking and appalling and so sad. But for anyone that grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and I did have a horrible time at school. The only English person in an all Welsh school when Wales was unbelievably good at rugby and England was unbelievably poor. I had an awful time. But as soon as school's finished and you're back home, there's no problem. It's only during school hours. But everything's online. There is no off time. Even if you're not going onto the WhatsApp groups, the Snapchat groups, the Facebook groups, you know that your friends or that the other people at school are talking about you, are saying things because you're being shown them during the break time, and it's 24/7, and it's harder for sort of people approaching 60 to sort of appreciate that these pressures don't stop when school's finished, don't stop when at half term, and the fact that you can so easily be sextorted. You can so easily be groomed, and you don't know, sort of what your children are up to when they're online. I mean, my kids now are in their 30s, but there's a real difference. There's only 2, 3 years difference in the age of my kids. The oldest one has lovely handwriting because all of their schoolwork was handwritten. The youngest one doesn't have lovely handwriting because all of his work was typed and on the internet. And, he's 30, 31. Um, so
My
even,
handwriting is terrible, and I had to handwrite everything.
yes, but everything was online. Everything was typed, everything was emailed in. And, you know, from a cultural point of view, or just sort of how you live, there are so much pressures on kids because everything's online. And it's not that you can't avoid going online because all your work's done online, all your lessons are online, and all the bullying's online. So there are so many pressures, and sometimes perhaps families and the police aren't as sympathetic when the younger people go missing, because you sort of think, just don't worry about it. Well, that's very easy to say. It's not easy to do
Yeah.
when you've got to look online to do your homework, and these people are saying things the whole time at you. So yes, very sad.
I remember a case with Locate, which was probably about 3 years ago, and it was like, could you assist on this very quickly, because this feels like a high risk case. And I remember like we came across the missing persons like Snapchat account, and they'd posted a story on like a cliff top, and if I remember correctly, I think like subsequently that was where they'd chosen to end their life. And it's like that like that was the kind of first time that had happened to me in like
Mm.
that sort of context. And like, yeah, it was kind of hard to sort of handle. And but
I mean,
understanding, yeah, exactly everything you've said is just saying don't worry about it. Like, well, no, like this person's gone missing and we're worried. Like
yes,
we care.
and it is so, if from sort of coming from a policing background, you can sometimes detach yourself from certain things. But it is, some of these cases are just heartbreaking because you put yourself in the position of, I'm a parent. What would I be thinking? Sometimes there's no closure whatsoever. That would, sort of, it breaks my heart if we haven't spoken to, sort of, the kids for a couple of days, because they live 4 hours away. But I'm texting all the time. But just imagine, it doesn't matter how they've gone missing or why they've gone missing. You haven't spoken to them for a year. You don't know, are they alive or dead? And just trying to find, some positive results for them. But sometimes the cases are heartbreaking, and that's one of the reasons that Locate do what they do, is just to try and help the families, to try and give that extra resource that um, the police aren't able to do, because they've had all of their resources absolutely decimated for the last sort of 14, 15 years. So they haven't got the people to do those inquiries. Yes, they can jump in a police car and drive around looking for them in the real world, but yes, they've got some great researchers if there's a terrorist case, if there's a murder, but they can't put all of those resources into every missing persons case. But it is frustrating where we had one case where it was a young trans individual, and they were on TikTok, and there was a video of them on a train track, saying about going to meet their grandmother who died. And you sort of think, well, clearly it's a sort of, I'm going to perhaps harm myself, and sent the details to the police. And they said, "Oh, can you send a screenshot, because TikTok's banned on our works computers." And you sort of go, "But you're the missing people unit. who only looks for children, and you're not allowed to look at the main site that all the children are on, it is rather handicapping yourself. I mean, I understand why, because they've got awful IT people, but who think of the safety and the um, of the police system rather than the safety of the people they're investigating.
It's just
But
another example where, like, having, I guess, and this would go for any OSINT investigator, I think, whether law enforcement or otherwise, like having the right infrastructure to be able to do your job effectively is paramount. Having, a standalone machine, or at least a virtual machine or something where you can go and do this work and research. And oftentimes, yeah, it's going to be porn sites. You're going to go on a dark web, you might find something awful. You might come across other things that you find distasteful, or things you just do not want on your actual, like, day-to-day machine. And you've got to have the right infrastructure in place, and there's so many solutions out there. Either commercial solutions, or the ability to use, like, cloud-based desktops and stuff through, like, Amazon, Google. They,
yeah,
there's so many
I mean,
options out there.
there are tools out there, but sometimes with law enforcement, and I guess with the military, and I understand why they've got to have very complex systems to make their systems secure. But actually, if it's budgets, if it's restrictions, sometimes those cheap standalone systems that look like anyone else's computer sat at home are the answers. The answers aren't the world's most expensive secure platform that it has such a unique footprint that only law enforcement use it, only military use it. If it's you want your computer to look like the computer of 10 million other people in that country.
Yeah,
You don't want your computer to look like only 4 people in the whole world. And, one of them works for the CIA and one works in Cheltenham. And you just sort of go, have a bog standard, cheap, rubbishy system. And if you break it, it breaks. If you've exposed to something, bin it. You can afford to bin something that costs 250 quid.
and that's the thing. You
You
just buy a
know,
laptop in a lot of cases. Worked at companies
yeah,
where we'd have, seems to be a commonly used term, is like a dirty laptop, and that's for when you want to do something which your corporate device is definitely going to say no. And in some
yes, I
environments, that's
must.
because you
Yeah,
can't even get on the internet, really, because they've locked everything down so dramatically. But having that
I was speaking.
ability to just, you know,
Yeah, I
achieve
was
a
speaking
result.
to some police investigators recently, and they'd been bought some dumb phones to receive confirmation texts. They hadn't been bought some cheap smartphones. And you sort of go, it must be more expensive to buy a dumb phone than going to Argos and getting a 30 quid Android. Um, because with lots of sites, Instagram, TikTok, you need to be able to go onto a smartphone and look at the app version as well as the desktop version. And when I was speaking to the researchers, it was at a police event, and they're sort of saying, "Oh well, we're on the police system, or we've got a research system, and that's all we've got." And you go, "I've got nothing against police motorcyclists, but." You sort of think in the police, they'll send a police motorcyclist on a very expensive course. They will literally that police motorbike will be their bike because it's set up for them because they're so touchy about the tire pressures and the setups on that bike. It is literally their motorbike. They will buy them, sort of £5,000 leathers that are just for them. Their crash helmet is worth hundreds, and yet a researcher, they won't buy him a 50 quid smartphone and give them a £50 prepaid credit card to go and buy things. And you sort of go, you're doing such an important job. You're finding such useful intelligence. It's such a false economy. And I say nothing against police motorcyclists. They're and traffic guys and girls, they're great. I nearly went on traffic myself. I had a yellow coat and I had a white hat. I was ready to go on traffic, and then I won't say his name, but he cancelled all the attachments. I never got to drive the ARV. Um, but they will spend money on that old style policing, and they won't spend the money. They'll say, "Well, you've got a computer, and we sent you on a course. What more do you need?" Give them the tools, and you'll be surprised at the results they get. And actually, OSINT years ago, and I know we haven't spoke about much about missing people, and I'll go on to some things in a minute. I was giving a talk to Trading Standards, and they were talking about how their budgets have been cut. And I was saying, well, OSINT generally 99% of the stuff you're doing is free. But you've handicapped yourself by giving yourself such tight restrictions on what you can and can't do. The courts haven't said you've got to do this. The Information Commission hasn't said you've got to do this. It's you lot on the top table have told your staff that they're not allowed to do things. You've handicapped them before they've even gone and done the research. Whereas if they'd done the research and put it before a court, let the court make a decision. If the court accepts it, you've got a new stated case, we can go and do these inquiries that haven't cost us any money. If they don't accept it, well, what have you lost? You wouldn't have done it anyway. But they'd given themselves such restrictions. And, the police were a bit like that at the start. And understandably, some of the privacy restrictions on them and, doing, having a RIPA authority and things like that. That's right. Get the authorities. But you can do so much inquiries, and vast majority of it is free. 50 quid, setting you up on a smartphone, setting you up on a few apps, and a prepaid credit card for when you've got to make a few test purchases. It would pay for itself, but it's unfortunate. They think real world. Hand stitched leathers for a biker, yeah, that's essential. Actually giving a researcher tools, not necessarily essential, because they've never understood what OSINT is.
That's the thing, I think, because like the cost to do like like a as like an OSINT professional now running a business, I think my costs in terms of like tooling and enabling investigations to happen are actually relatively low, like on a month to month basis. And as an idiot, I'm pretty sure the government could afford it.
Yeah, yeah.
Regardless of
And
budget black holes.
and you think, how much you spend on a nice laptop, you're buying one or two a year, or every other year, because I tend to drop mine every so often. The government's going to buy 1,000 of them, 10,000 of them. They're going to pay 10% of what you pay, and they are next to nothing. And yes, I'm with you. I mean, I use bog standard cheap computers. I don't use Apple things. Uh, the laptop before last was a second-hand one that had the same sort of aerodynamic qualities as a house brick. But the number of times I dropped the bag on the tube when I was in London and it never broke. It was quite heavy, but it was a solid bit of kit. But it was a second-hand one, cost me 40 quid. And I just upgraded the RAM on it. Did fine. You don't need, if you're playing games, you need a good computer. If you're not playing games, I'm only going online. I'm going on databases. I'm finding social media accounts. I don't need the world's greatest computer. I just need to be able to get online and do my stuff. And that's what police researchers are like. But the people who are controlling them don't necessarily understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, or the benefit of what they could bring.
I've had examples with that where talking to like government organizations, and one of the easiest ways to try and get them to upskill is like, especially like when it's convenient timing, like a Trace Labs event or something, where it's like, well, you can learn a little bit of things here and like how you would do like social media intelligence, and then you've got this event coming up, which would be a really great opportunity to do it without any like operational risk or like security risks. And invariably, the government organization turns around and goes, "Yeah, but what about RIPA?" And then they start asking questions about like, well, how would an organization like Trace Labs get approval for these investigations to happen? And it's like that, like very tunnel vision mentality. It's like, well, they're not a government entity, so, and they're taking these cases from public appeals. So as secondly, it's like this is OSINT for good, so there's no concerns around like the invasion of privacy in this part because these are missing persons cases. It's like this is policy and like you're questioning yourself.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I must admit, I'm doing some stuff recently for the police, and they were saying, well, you obviously need access to police national computer, police national database, or the information system or intelligence system, and you need this and that. And you go, no, I don't want any of that, because presumably your officers have checked PNC, they've checked the intelligence system, because if they'd found anything relevant, they'd have solved the case. So presumably they haven't solved it, which is why you're asking me to look at it. And I'm only going to use stuff that's online, so I don't want access to any of your stuff. I really couldn't care less. If I find something that you sort of think, oh, well, it'd be nice to know who the keeper of that car was, well, I'll feed it to you. You go and do the check. I don't want to do the check. Because as soon as you give me access to something, someone's going to say, oh, what else is he misusing that system for? I said, so I'd rather not have it. I don't want it.
yeah,
I don't want anyone to make that allegation. Plus, if I find something, I can just send it to you. It's so much easier. But people think they've never really understood the true benefit of OSINT, and they still think, oh, we've got all the useful intelligence. And you go, if you had all the useful intelligence, you'd have solved this case. You've got all the secure closed data, you've got the convictions, you've got the keeper logs, you've got, you know, photographs and fingerprints and DNA. You haven't got Facebook, you haven't got Instagram, you haven't got 1,000 photographs from his friends. I have. And you sort of think, this is how we're going to solve it. So, but anyway, talking about photographs, that leads us nicely on to
it's a
talking
beautiful
about
segue.
photographs when we're looking at missing people. So, going back to sort of images and missing people investigations, there's a lot of time that we do work in relation to images that we're recording or we're recovering from online resources. And, if you're taking a photograph with a smartphone, with a digital camera, then there's lots of hidden data within that that can include copyright information, say like a name and an email address, can have geolocation information, date and time a photo was taken, even a camera type or a serial number. But with social media, and the vast majority of the time we're looking for missing people, it's from social media sites. The fireworks are going again. And social media sites, whether it's Facebook, Insta, Twitter, they're stripping out the XF data, the hidden metadata within these images. So yes, someone like Facebook may still hold the metadata, the XF data, but actually when you're viewing that image, it isn't there. So as an investigator, when we're looking at an image that we've recovered from an online resource, we have to think, what's that image telling us? How can I find out where that image was taken? And this is just a silly little example that I use, and then I'll show you some genuine cases. This is one that I just use in training that was taken off of Twitter from years ago. And it was someone had posted that they were obviously going for a beer. Now, although the original image would have that XF data to say where it was taken, that's been stripped out. But as an investigator, you've still got to think, okay, where was it taken? Now, if it's a well-known beauty spot, if it's a well-known tourist spot, then yes, you can do a reverse image search. There's some great AI sites out there that you do the reverse image search and it will tell you, because it's looked at, 1,000 similar images from that location. But if you take something in your street and you live in just a bog standard normal street that has no tourist attraction, it's no good doing a reverse image search because it's just going to go, there's a pint of beer or there's some houses. So sometimes it's looking at a photograph and going, well, what's in that image that I can investigate? And obviously in this one, we've got nearly all of a telephone number for a fish and chip shop. Now, I haven't got the name of the street, but if we've got nearly all of the telephone number, we can go in and we can research it, whether it's Google, Bing, Yandex, searching it as a phrase, with multiple spacing, excuse me, and seeing where that telephone number relates to. Finding, the name of the company, the location of that premises, and then taking it from say just having the name of the street to going into Google Maps, going on to Google Street View, and then comparing what Google Street View has to what the image has. Now, Google Street View, some streets, it might only do a street view once every 10, 12 years. Sometimes when I'm looking at streets in London, it's like every year they're there. So yes, there's going to be differences, but look for the constants. So the streets, the Pucker Pies sign has changed, but the big chippy sign is the same. The house opposite, the blue arrow pointing to the white house with the pointy gable top next to the two semi-detached houses that are long ways, so portrait to landscape. They're there. Look at the street lighting. Street lighting rarely going to change. Councils and areas have their type of street lighting. So we've got the flower beds here. So we're pretty happy that the photograph of the pint of beer was taken in this location. And then it's just a matter of turning the street view round. And sometimes, it's going on to Bing to look for their version of Street View. Sometimes, sort of Yandex or Badu if it's, sort of a Chinese location. Excuse me. Once we've got the location, we've got the name of the property. Well, it might be if you were a local investigator, if you were the police, when the photograph was uploaded. Are there CCTV cameras in the area? Can you go to the, say in this case, the pub or the hotel, who was purchasing things at the time? Are there any credit card receipts? So it's just using the clues that are there as an investigator to try and find what you're looking for. And sometimes it's the simple things. So there aren't digital clues. There are sort of clues, visual clues that as an investigator we look for. Excuse me. Excuse me. So this is a missing persons case that we looked at in Locate. And I've obscured the lady in the pictures because she was a missing person. There's no need to show her. Excuse me. She'd been missing for 3 years, but we identified a mobile phone number for her. And by putting the mobile phone number into a number of online resources, into burner phones, checking it against a number of apps, we found that the number was still active for her on WhatsApp. So she'd been missing for a couple of years, but on WhatsApp, she'd been active, only the week before. But WhatsApp is just like the social media sites, they strip out the XF data, the hidden data in an image. So although we had an image, we didn't know where it was taken. But, excuse me, But if you knew this location, if you were from this area, excuse me, you'd probably be able to identify it quite clearly, because glass-fronted balconies on a block of flats with a grey fascia in the stairwell, it's got a car park. In the background, there's quite distinctive properties. So if you lived round the corner from this property, you'd know it straight away. But we believed she was in a particular area of London, and this goes back a few years now. But I don't live in London. Oh, excuse me. And we didn't know where it was. Yes, we could go to the police and say, if we knew this location, we should be able to identify where this lady recently was, or perhaps is living. Yes, we could just give the telephone number to the police and they could do the cell site analysis and they could try and locate it. But you've got to try and find the officer who's going to deal with it and send that request off to the mobile phone provider and put a lot of work in to get that result. If we can identify the address, they've just got to send an officer around to the address to make the inquiry. So one of our investigators at Locate, and he wasn't even in the UK, just researched glass-fronted balconies. So one of our volunteers at Locate researched glass-fronted balconies and came up with a company that provided glass-fronted balconies to a particular building project in London. And just from what they'd put on their website, it looked very much like the location that photograph had been taken in. So then, with the address from the company website, looking at Google Earth as opposed to the Street View, the black dotted line, excuse me, the black dotted line is the angle that the camera's pointing, and then the coloured arrows are the points of interest that match up. So from the balcony, can we identify in the background the terraced of houses where they've got the black grey fascia on the top half, the 3-story block of flats with the white UPVC windows? Yes, everything matches. Turning Google Street View round from where those two properties are, you can see the block of flats in the distance with the grey fronted stairwell with the glass fronted balconies. And then it's just a matter of, checking out the local authority, checking out land registry to identify which flat the lady was stood in, which balcony she was stood on when the photograph was taken, to then identify where she was living. And this was a case that was 3 years old that hadn't been investigated for, probably the month after she'd gone missing. The police stopped investigating it, understandably. But her family weren't aware of where she was. There were concerns for her safety, but actually just volunteers looking at the open source intelligence that was available from the details we knew about her, someone actually not even in the UK found the crucial bit of information that we were then able to put together to identify, the property this lady was staying in, and then she could be visited by an officer and asked, if she's okay. There was another case where, and sometimes these missing people cases are very sad, where it's individuals who are in distress, where these individuals are in distress and perhaps need sometimes some medical intervention. And this was a case where there was an individual who'd gone from one end of the country and had gone to London without any medication, without any friends, without any supervision, and clearly needed some assistance. But whilst his phone wasn't active, he was using the Wi-Fi facility on his phone to upload images and posts to Twitter. And again, this is a couple of years ago. I've blurred out their face and the account names because again, they're genuine individuals and you've no need to see them. But if you had the original photographs, you'd have the XF data to say exactly where it was posted. All we've got is, Ilford, London, and got some very dark, bad photographs. So when we're looking at the images, just having basic image software, nothing expensive, just generally free software that maybe lightens or makes things a little bit sharper. You can lighten an image and go, well, that photograph, even without seeing that it's ESO, knowing that it's red and blue and the layout of what the garage looks like, I'm thinking, well, that's an ESO garage. If we know that it's in Ilford, ESO garage is in Ilford, into a search engine, and then it is just, let's view all the garages, the ESO garages in that area, and go on to Google Street View and see if any of them match up, because there's quite a distinctive street furniture. And you can go from Google Street View and go, yes, well, that's going to be that car wash and that garage. The next photo, lighten it up, sharpen up the telephone numbers, and actually that photograph, although it wasn't posted at the same time, it was like a day later or something, or a little bit later, was just up the street from where the ESO garage was. So he's hanging around all the same location. And then the next photo, because of my intimate knowledge of fast food restaurants, I could tell instantly that that's the light pine favoured by McDonald's on their bins. And going down from the garage past the car dealership, there's a McDonald's. McDonald's have free Wi-Fi. It's what, sort of Greggs have free Wi-Fi. Starbucks have free Wi-Fi. That's why you see kids hanging around outside these places. And someone who's living rough, not using their phone, but using the Wi-Fi connection from their phone, is able to use the free Wi-Fi in a McDonald's to post photographs to Twitter. So we can see, that he's active within a particular street, within a particular location. And actually, he also posted a photograph of a tent in a field. And, excuse me, then by sort of doing research about where homeless people are living in tents in Seven Kings area, we were able to sort of highlight the area that we think he's sleeping in. And, within a day or two, he was not recovered by the police, but he was, located by the police and was able to be reunited with his family and his medication. And that helped him. Yes, that you could just give the basic details to the police, but sometimes if you give them a lot of information with all the answers, they will go out of their way to try and help you. Sometimes when we're looking at images, and these aren't missing people cases, but these are just trying to get people to understand that an image, yes, if you've got the original image, you've got the XF data, you've got the hidden data. But if you've just got the image, there are still clues within that image. And if you're looking at medical images, whether it's x-rays, whether it's baby scans, you think when you go to the hospital, they don't ask what your Instagram account name is. They don't want to know what your Facebook name is. They want to know what your NHS name is. What's your real name? What's your date of birth? So so it's not just, mothers to be that put up baby scans. There's fathers to be, there's grandparents to be, there's uncles and aunts. And when they put up those baby scans, and I've blurred out the name here because it's an innocent member of the public, they've got the genuine full name and a date of birth for the patient. So even if the screen name on Instagram or Facebook is something weird, we know what their real name is because we've got their baby scan, and we know where the hospital is, which tends to be the nearest big hospital to where they live. Think about Lorraine Kelly when everyone was thanking the NHS for getting their COVID jabs, and she posted that she just had her jab, and a load of anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers were slagging her off and saying, that's not even your card, that's not even your name. It says Lorraine Smith. To which she pointed out, well, I'm Lorraine Kelly on the telly because I started when I was like 18 or 19, but I married Mr. Smith when I was slightly older. And I'm really Lorraine Smith. So when she gets her treatment, she's Lorraine Smith.
Any relation?
No, no, no relation whatsoever. I don't think so anyway. I don't think there's any Scottish people in my family. There's no European people in my family. If there was, I'd grab a passport. Um, but it's surprising how many cases that I've looked at where you scroll through and you'll find, someone's gone to the opticians and they've included a photograph of their eyeball, and in it will be their name. They've had an X-ray at the dentist and they think it's a silly photograph. It's got their name. And again, I've blurred out some of the details here because these are just ones I've grabbed off of Facebook. People with pass certificates for their driving tests. Now, in the UK, we know that a driving number is somebody's name and their date of birth, but the date of birth is jumbled up. So if I can see their driver number, I've got their date of birth and their name. In Ireland, it also has their address. So you can identify where people live. And there was one case where I got sent it by some lawyers that really wanted to visit this person to serve some court papers on them, but they didn't know who it was. And I had their Instagram page, but they'd never scrolled down far enough. And if they'd scrolled down just a little bit further, there was a photograph of their pass certificate. Not this lady, this was just a grab off of Facebook. But the person they wanted to serve court papers on, it was all of her details, and it was so easy. Obviously, I didn't reflect that in the invoice to the solicitor, but the clues are often there, but they're missed. And again, I've obscured the faces and the names here, but when people post photographs of their kids at school, and there'll be the kids in a polo shirt, well, do a screen grab, normally flick it round to be able to read what school somebody goes to, and then stick it into Google, stick it into Bing. What school does somebody go to? No, the school aren't going to tell me someone's address, but actually, in a particular case, knowing where the school was and then combining it with some photographs on Facebook and searching Google Street View only took me sort of 10 minutes. I identified someone's home address that had only started because I knew where their school was and knowing the route that they'd have taken to school. Look for the little clues to know where people, that to give us that extra bit of an investigation. One of the cases, again, this is from a few years ago, trying to track somebody down. They weren't on any databases because they hadn't been in the UK that long, but they were on Facebook and they'd had a delivery of food. And on their food, 34 Harvard with an R. We believe they lived in the Chiswick area of London. 34 Harvard Road in Chiswick. All of a sudden, it's an address, all just from their Domino's pizza. And this is, from years ago, so they're not there now. But it's just using your own life experiences, especially because of lockdown, we all ordered food and had it delivered. Somewhere there's an address so they know they've delivered the food to the right people instead of the next customer. And this is just another training example. So this person hasn't done anything wrong. But when you're investigating eBay accounts or online sales sites, when people are selling something, they'll quite often say, "Well, I want 50 quid for it." But if you bought it new on Amazon now, it cost £100 or £200. And they'll include a screen grab from Amazon to tell you how much something costs. Well, if you've signed into Facebook, and most people, different for us OSINT people, we don't keep our cookies. We clear out our cookies. We sign in every time. We use sort of different browsers for personal and work.
Speak for
But most,
yourself.
well, yeah, most people, excuse me, they just use the one browser and they never want to put their passwords in twice. So they're always signed in. So if they do a screen grab from Amazon, it's Amazon saying, this is how much it costs to deliver to an Amazon customer at the Amazon customer's postcode. And so you've gone from an eBay account name that doesn't make much sense to now knowing that it's Ian who lives in an address in Taunton with a postcode that only relates to 10 properties. Well, you can find Ian in those 10 properties, all because he'd already signed into Amazon when he decided to do that screen grab. And it's surprising how often that happens. Yes, when you're researching an eBay account that's selling stolen property, on the stolen property, they haven't included that screen grab. But what else are they selling? What else have they recently sold? Look for the clues there. Don't just do a limited investigation. Open it up. There are clues there. It's just about finding them. And sometimes, if I sent you a photograph, or if I showed you a photograph that's taken within 10 miles of where you live, you'll go, oh, I know where that is, because you know the local area. But the more time you spend on OSINT inquiries, the more you recognise what a Latvian house looks like, or what the street furniture in Albania is. And sites like Random Stuff, you can click into various countries and it will tell you what the street furniture is like, what the roof tiles are like, and it helps you identify countries, identify regions. So when you get a photograph, and we've done it with lots of, say, the young, predominantly young males who've gone missing, that have been trafficked in from Eastern Europe, gone missing into the UK. When you're then seeing them back on Facebook with a photograph, and you're going, well, I know they're back in Albania, I know they're in Romania,
Yeah.
because that is this village. But it's using these sites, sometimes you sort of go, oh yeah, that's a Nigerian telegraph pole. That's an Australian cool box. Little sites. The clues are there in the images. It's just that we have to be investigators and we have to use them. So many times people think everything you do online's got to be digital. No, the internet and the computer are just tools that investigators are using. So sometimes, the clue is a visual image, not a digital image. So let me stop sharing. So hopefully, I appreciate it, that wasn't all about missing people, but it doesn't matter what you're investigating online, whether it's missing people, whether it's paedophiles, whether it's fraudsters, whether it's wanted people, whether it's terrorists, because everyone uses Facebook the same way. They use TikTok the same way. They use these online resources the same way. So it's how you interpret and how you use the information that you're given, turning that from information to credible, relevant intelligence. And that's, sort of when people badmouth OSINT and they go, oh, it's not intelligence, it's information. And you go, well, I supply intelligence. I find information. I supply intelligence. You perhaps get supplied with information because you haven't got very good researchers. They'll just do a screen grab of absolutely everything and they haven't analysed it and they haven't checked. With our missing people cases for Locate, we don't send the police details of every Facebook account we find, because some of them are 10 years old, some of them are 5 years old. That's not relevant. If we find a Facebook account that has been updated and has been active since the person's gone missing, that's relevant, credible intelligence. That's what we're sending. And we had one case with someone who'd been thought to have killed themselves off of Beachy Head. Um, but actually, we located a Twitter account that had been created by them 10 days later. And because of what they were following and what they were posting, we were able to identify which country they'd gone off to. Um, but it's just finding the online sites and analysing it, and that's the int bit, that's the intelligence bit. So you've got to be a good investigator. They're not all digital clues. Use your intelligence skills, use your life skills, and you can create a really useful, relevant, credible intelligence package that sort of the police, the security services, anybody would really relish having that information. So I hope that's of some relevance. Appreciate it wasn't all about missing people, but OSINT is such a crucial thing nowadays because so much of our lives are online. So much of the information we rely on is online. Yes, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, we'd have gone to a library. We don't have to. Everything's online. Yes, sometimes you go back to the original source, but there's so much credible information out there that we can turn from that information to an intelligence package. You can have a great career. You can put some really bad people behind bars. You can help some really good people. But go out there and find the information and make it into good intelligence.
100%. I think that's really a really fitting end to what is UK OSINT Community's OSINT Week. We are pre-recording this because I'm away when this will air, but we've got the event in Glasgow this week, have the event in London, headlined by Elliot Higgins, and I think this webinar, off the back of our webinar from last week, talking around like disinformation and misinformation and ahead of the US election, I think bringing it just kind of full circle a little bit. We talked about a lot of different things during the course of this week, and now taking all the things we can find and actually making and extracting that relevant and useful intelligence. I think, that's ultimately what it's all about. But also, like what you touched on there, was when you're providing the intelligence to the end client, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's a private client, insurance company, I don't know, MI6, whoever you might be writing your intelligence for, being able to take those bits of information and go, right, these are the ones that are relevant. As an aside, in a report, you might include, well, we also identified these accounts, but there's nothing that's relevant to this investigation. But, I guess for posterity, here it is. But, like, being able to take that and, I guess, some of the commercial tools out there for, I guess, bringing this conversation full circle from where we started earlier, like, I know, particularly in the private investigator space, where OSINT is more of a afterthought because it's more around surveillance, it's doing old-fashioned PI work. They'll use some of the tools which will provide them a report, but that report isn't necessarily accurate because it finds matches on a name, or it might match on a username and provide some of that information. So bringing that analysis and contextualizing it and actually providing that end report which provides the stuff that is timely, is relevant, can be actioned, is ultimately what it's all about. And I guess there's no greater use case for that than in the missing persons cases that you're investigating.
Yes, because the families have no answers and no help otherwise. Understandable, the police aren't going to look at these, they're not going to reopen 13,000 cases. They haven't got the resources to do it. And it's not that we're going to find answers in the 13,000 cases, but slowly we're chipping away and we're finding some of those people. We're finding some of the answers. Sometimes, it's they're sad results, but it's getting a closure for the families that you wouldn't be getting them otherwise. And it's just trying to help where we can.
100%. And I guess also the profile of Locate only seems to be growing as well. The podcast
Yes,
seems to do very well, and also the TV show recently.
Yes, I think there's some more podcasts coming out and some more TV or some more episodes looking at unidentified bodies, and perhaps they'll branch more into the missing people cases as well. Um, but yes, I think the agreement with the police is nearly signed and agreed. And so they'll be working closer and closer with the police and helping, hopefully, more and more families. And I say the more we can do, because at no cost to the families, it's just trying to help them, and just trying to help them in any way that we can, just to give a little bit of closure, or just to say, hey, we located them. They don't want to speak to you, but they're alive. And as a parent, that at least is some relief, I'm sure.
It's got to be better
So
than not knowing.
certainly,
Amazing. Well, Neil, thanks so much for your time. It's been
thank you,
really,
Aaron.
really fascinating for me. I feel like it's been a great conversation. For everyone else, I believe our next webinar will be live early December, pending any sudden announcements, which I'm not yet privy to. So thank you for watching. Neil Smith is available on social media at UK OSINT, not to be confused with UK OSINT community. I'm Aaron Roberts, aka Aaron CTI. Thank you for watching and have a great evening.